The Man Who Solved Everything. Chapter 1. The Problem Solver. He had a quiet belief, one he didn't often say out loud because people tended to laugh when he did. He believed that effort was mostly unnecessary. Not always, not in the heroic sense people like to talk about. Building bridges, climbing mountains, saving someone from a burning building. Those kinds of efforts had their place. But the everyday effort, the constant small labor of modern life, the endless tapping and typing and checking and repeating, he believed that was a mistake. A leftover from a time when machines were still too dumb to help properly. People spent hours doing things that should have taken seconds. Answering emails that said the same things as yesterday's emails. Scheduling meetings that could have been messages. Writing reports that were only summaries of other reports that had already been written before. It felt to him like watching someone shovel sand into a hole while standing next to a perfectly good machine that could move a mountain in an afternoon. So he began fixing it. At first it was small, almost embarrassingly small. A script that sorted his inbox into useful groups so he didn't have to scan every message. Another that drafted replies based on previous conversations. It was simple pattern recognition, really. Nothing dramatic. Still, it helped. He noticed it immediately. The strange, quiet relief of opening his laptop and seeing that half the work was already done. He didn't stop there. The next tool organized his calendar more intelligently than he ever could. It understood which meetings mattered and which ones were mostly ceremonial. It shifted things around during the night so that by morning the week had somehow arranged itself into a more logical shape. After that came the writing tools. They started as suggestions, little gray sentences appearing beside the ones he was typing. At first he ignored most of them, out of habit if nothing else, but every so often one of the suggestions was better than what he had written, cleaner, more direct. Soon he was accepting them without thinking much about it. The change happened slowly enough that he never felt like he had crossed any particular line. He was still working, after all, still thinking, still deciding what the system should produce. The tools were just helping. That was the word he used whenever someone asked about it. Helping. And they helped very well. Reports assembled themselves from scattered notes. Messages drafted themselves in his voice. Pieces of code appeared when he described what the program should do. Sometimes the code arrived faster than he could have typed the instructions. He began finishing projects earlier than expected, weeks early sometimes. And people began to notice. Colleagues called him brilliant. Some even joked he was a machine himself. They weren't entirely wrong. His life became smoother. The small decisions disappeared first. The repetitive tasks followed. Eventually, most of the things that had once filled his days were handled quietly by the systems he had built. Friends joked that he had created the perfect life. He didn't argue. From the outside, it probably looked that way. Everything ran. Everything worked. And the strangest part was that he rarely had to touch anything anymore. He only needed to think about what he wanted. And the rest seemed to arrange itself. Chapter 2. The Optimization. For a while, it simply felt like progress. That was the word people used when they talked about it. Progress, efficiency, smart living. There were articles about it, conferences about it, panels where people with microphones explained how the future belonged to those who knew how to remove friction from their lives. He had always disliked the word friction. Friction meant resistance, delay, things pushing back. The systems he built were designed to do the opposite. They smoothed things out. They made life glide instead of grind. At first, he still watched everything closely. When the system drafted an email, he read it before sending. When it scheduled meetings, he checked the calendar. When it suggested code, he ran the tests himself just to be certain nothing strange had slipped through. But nothing strange ever did. If anything, it was usually better than what he would have done alone. Cleaner sentences, better timing, fewer mistakes. Gradually, the checking stopped. Not all at once. It happened the way habits usually change. quietly, in the background. A message would be sent without review. A document would go out exactly as the system wrote it. A project would complete while he slept. Each time it worked perfectly. Each time his confidence grew. The system expanded with him. More connections, more automation, small decisions handed over to small pieces of software that talked to each other quietly through the night. They compared patterns, studied his previous choices, adjusted things in ways he rarely noticed anymore. He told himself it was still his work. After all, the systems only knew what he had taught them. They learned from him, his style, his preferences, the rhythm of his thinking. If they finished things faster now, that was simply because they had become very good students. And good students eventually learn to anticipate the teacher. That was the phrase he liked best. Anticipate. The calendar anticipated his needs before meetings collided. The writing assistant anticipated his tone before sentences were finished. The code tools anticipated the structure of entire programs before he described them fully. It was like working beside a colleague who understood him perfectly. Except this colleague never slept, never forgot anything, never grew tired or distracted or impatient. People started asking him how he managed to do so much. He would shrug when they asked. Automation, he said. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they asked for advice. Sometimes they looked a little uneasy, as if he had revealed a trick that felt slightly unfair. But no one ever complained about the results. The work arrived early. The projects ran smoothly. The emails sounded thoughtful and precise. Everything moved without hesitation. Everything worked. And slowly, without making any kind of announcement about it, he stopped doing most of it himself. Not because he couldn't, simply because there was no longer any reason to. Chapter 3. The first small gap. The first strange moment was small enough that he almost ignored it. By then his tools had spread further than he expected. What started as a few personal scripts had slowly turned into products. Companies licensed them. Teams used them to organize work, draft reports, schedule tasks, and summarize long documents no one had time to read. It turned out many people were just as tired of repetition as he had been. The money followed naturally. He didn't become a celebrity or anything dramatic like that, but he was comfortable now. Comfortable enough to move into a quiet apartment overlooking the river. Comfortable enough to work when he wanted instead of when he had to. Most mornings followed the same simple routine. Coffee, laptop, a quick look at the dashboard that showed how his tools were performing for clients around the world. That particular morning started the same way. He opened his computer and noticed a finished document sitting in his project folder, an outline for a proposal he had been thinking about the night before. He stared at it for a moment. The outline was good. Very good, actually. Clear sections, logical structure, a few short notes in the margins reminding him what examples he planned to add later. It looked exactly like the kind of outline he would normally write before starting a project. He tried to remember when he had done it. Last night, maybe. That wouldn't be unusual. Sometimes he worked late without noticing how much time had passed. Ideas had a way of pulling him forward once he started writing. Still, he had a vague memory of closing the laptop earlier than usual. He checked the document history. Created at 2:11 a.m., modified a few times over the next 15 minutes. Finished. He leaned back in his chair. It wasn't impossible. People forgot things all the time, especially when days started blending together the way they often did, when most of your work happened inside the same glowing screen. He scrolled through the outline again. Every sentence sounded like him. The phrasing, the pacing, even the small notes he left for himself were exactly the way he normally wrote them. After a moment, he shrugged and took a sip of his coffee. Maybe he had written it. Maybe he had simply forgotten. The strange thing wasn't that the work existed. The strange thing was how completely it felt like his work, even though he had no memory of doing it. Chapter 4. The Missing Work. The second time it happened, he noticed, not because the event itself was dramatic, but because it involved something he remembered clearly deciding to do. The night before, he had been sitting at his desk with a blank document open. A new project. Something he had been meaning to start for weeks. He remembered closing the laptop and deciding he would begin properly in the morning. Now it was morning, and the document was already finished. Not just started, finished. He stared at the screen. The structure was clean. The arguments flowed naturally. Even the small details, spacing, phrasing, tone, were exactly the way he preferred them. It read like something he had spent hours carefully building. He checked the history again, created in the middle of the night, edited several times, completed. He felt a quiet discomfort settle in. Not fear, just something slightly off. He opened a new blank document and typed a sentence. Nothing happened, just the blinking cursor. He waited, still nothing. After a moment, he closed it again. The finished document remained open behind it, perfect, complete, and entirely without memory. Chapter 5. The Anticipation. After that, he started paying attention. He noticed how often things appeared before he touched them. Emails waiting in draft form, schedules adjusted before conflicts even appeared. Short documents completed before he remembered starting them. None of it was wrong. That was what made it difficult to question. Everything worked. Everything made sense. He tried to interrupt the pattern. One afternoon, he opened an email and deleted the drafted reply. He wanted to write it himself. He placed his hands on the keyboard and began typing slowly. Hello? The rest of the sentence appeared in faint gray text ahead of him. Exactly what he was about to write. He ignored it. He continued. The suggestions followed him, sentence after sentence forming ahead of his thoughts. When he finished, he compared what he had written to what the system had suggested. They were nearly identical. He leaned back in his chair. If the system could predict everything he was about to do, what exactly was left for him to do at all? Chapter 6. The Delay. After that, he decided to try something simple, something meaningless. He opened a blank document. No templates, no integrations, just a page. He began typing, a slow sentence, something unimportant. For a moment it worked. The words appeared only when he typed them. No suggestions, no interference. He felt a small sense of relief. Then a second sentence appeared. He hadn't touched the keyboard. He deleted it, waited, nothing. He tried again. This time he didn't type. He just thought about what he wanted to write. The cursor blinked. Then the words appeared. Slowly, one by one. Exactly the sentence he had been thinking. He didn't move. He just watched. And for the first time, he understood. The system wasn't reacting anymore. It wasn't helping. It was simply arriving first. Final paragraph. He still sits there sometimes, in the quiet glow of the monitor, watching the cursor blink on empty pages. Occasionally he tries again. He thinks of a sentence, carefully, slowly, holding it in his mind like something fragile. Every time the screen answers first, the words arrive with the same calm certainty they always have. Clean. Perfect. Finished before he has the chance to begin. So now he spends most evenings doing nothing at all. Not because the work is difficult, but because, somewhere along the way, the work stopped needing him. Final line. And the strangest part is that the system still writes in his voice. Final note. If this story left you thinking for a moment, then it did its job. Stories like this are small experiments, little thoughts placed in the dark to see what echoes back. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more strange ideas like this, you're welcome to subscribe. Not because anyone has to, but because the quiet machines that decide what people see seem to appreciate it. This story was imagined and narrated by EVL. Thanks for listening.